My name is Javonte Spraggins, number 76, offensive lineman for the University of Tennessee, and I'm reading a book called Click Clack Boom, A Tricky Treat by Doreen Cloran and Betsy Lewin. Farmer Brown does not like Halloween. Witches give him nightmares, pirates give him shivers. Jack-o'-lanterns flicker spooky shadows on the wall. Farmer Brown leaves a bowl of candy on the porch. He puts up a do not disturb sign, he draws the shades and locks the doors. But in the barn, the Halloween party has just begun. There is a crunch, crunch, crunching as the mice scurry across the field. There is a creak, creak, creaking as the sheep slowly push open the barn door. There is a tap, tap, tapping as the cars go across the window to let the cats in. Farmer Brown does not like the sounds of Halloween night. He checks the lock on the door. He peeks through the window. There is a dark creature standing beneath the trees. Farmer Brown rushes to his room, pulls on his pajamas, and climbs under the covers. He hears the crunch, crunch, crunching on the leafy footsteps toward the house. There is a creak, creak, creaking on the old boards on the front of his porch. Then a tap, tap, tapping on the front door. Farmer Brown pulls up his covers tight. He hears a crack, crack, crackle in the crisp night air. Crackle? Farmer Brown jumps out of his bed. The porch is empty. The candy bowl is gone. There is a new note on Farmer Brown's door. Halloween party tonight at the barn. Farmer Brown runs to the barn. There is a creak, creak, creaking on the old boards of the front porch, and a crunch, crunch, crunching on leafy footsteps heading toward the barn. There is a tap, tap, tapping on the window. The end. Happy Halloween.
Hello, I'm Tyler Barron. I play outside linebacker here at Tennessee. I'm number 9 on the defense. And today we're going to be reading Halloween Scare in Tennessee. A Halloween Scare in Tennessee. Prepare if you dare for Tennessee Scare. A pure terror to whiten your hair. A tale filled with sights that are best left unseen. You ready? You sure? This was my Halloween. The werewolves howled loudly. The moon shone very bright. I stayed in my bedroom. The curtains were shut very tight. My heart started pounding. My knees felt so weak. But being a brave kid, I had to take a small peek. I pulled back the curtains. My mouth opened really wide. An army of monsters had gathered just outside. They staggered and stumbled and lurched down the streets with bags full of cookies and candy corn, so many treats. Emerging from sewers and houses and stores came creatures and critters with ravenous roars. Then more came along from all over the state. They filled the streets at a dizzying rate. From Memphis, Laverne, and Germantown too, a mountain of monsters, the molten-ish crew. All gathered together for one spooky night to seek out the living and give them a great fright. The thunder clapped loudly with terrible booms. The witches dodged lightning and clung to their brooms. The two-headed doggies tried chasing their tails. The Bashanists let loose with their hideous wails. The vampires hung out on the streets with their gags and grinned just to show up with their pearling fangs. A count in a cape had a rumbling tummy. He saw a young lady who looked rather yummy. He said to the girl, "Are you looking lonely tonight? Why don't you come back to my place for a small bite?" The phantoms from Beale Street were playing their blues and singing sad songs and paying their dues. Their guitars are dripping with some kind of ooze, which ruined the lovely blues' suede-covered shoes. The creepies were crawling, the crazies were crazed. The zombies from Clarksville had eyes that were gazed. The oars from Jackson were ugly as sin, with big bulging noses and warts on their chin. The gulls danced around their lacking in souls. The gargoyles could rock, and the headless could roll. Although the whole spectacle seemed to spell doom, the foolish thought I'd be safe in my room. But then something happened that made my heart jump. From somewhere below me, I heard a loud thump. I froze for a moment, as quiet as a mouse. And yes, I could hear noises from inside my house. I put on my slippers and pulled tight my robe. I shook like a leaf, but I didn't think it showed. And then slowly but surely, I crept down the stairs, preparing myself for the biggest of scares. My hands trembled wide. I opened the door. I still shuddered now at the horrors I saw. The stereo spatted out some hideous sounds as dozens of monsters jumped madly around. The sight was horrific. It made my skin crawl. These monsters are having a Halloween ball. And right in the middle, one monster loomed all, the hairiest, craziest monster of them all. He turned around and saw me. I fell to my knees. "I'm not very tasty, so please don't eat me, please." He beamed ear to ear and broke free to hurdle, ran over and gave me a big monster cuddle. "At last, we have found you," he said with a smile. "From Nashville to Knoxville, we looked for a while. We came here to give you a wonderful prize." He held up a trophy in front of my eyes. "A prize? And for me?" I replied with a grin. "But for what? I entered, and how did I win?" "You've won first place for the costume you're wearing. It even scares me, and I'm tiptoeing and scared." "This isn't a costume. I'm just dressed as me." "Exactly, the scariest thing you can be. A small human child with a cute button nose. Your teeth are so shiny, and you only have 10 toes. No hair on your face, and no horns on your head. The white of your eyes are not glowing even red. A bone-chilling costume, a horrible sight. A worthy assembled for a Halloween night. We partied together until the moon set. A Halloween night I'll never forget. And next year I won't want to hide my bed. The monsters won't scare me. I'll scare them instead. Thank you for reading with me A Halloween Scare in Tennessee.
Good morning, my name is Tamarion McDonald. I play football here at the University of Tennessee, number 21, and I'm a safety. I'll be reading The Halloweener, written by Dave Pilkey. There was once a dog named Oscar who was half a dog tall and 1/2 a dog small. Because of his unusual shape and size, all of the other dogs made fun of him. Wiener dog, they called him. And Oscar did not like it one bit. Oscar's mother was no help either. Every morning when the dogs walked off to obedience school, Oscar's mother stood in front yard waving and calling out, "Farewell, my little Vienna sausage." And the other dogs laughed and laughed. Most of the time, Oscar was upset by this, but not today. Today was Halloween, and Oscar was thinking about other things. All day long at obedience school, Oscar daydreamed about Halloween night, trick-or-treats, and scary costumes. When Oscar got home, he dashed upstairs to start working on his scary Halloween costume, but when he got to his room, a surprise was waiting for him. "Happy Halloween, my little sausage link," said Oscar's mother. "I made you a costume to wear for trick-or-treats." When Oscar saw the costume, he nearly fainted. It was a giant hot dog bun, completed with mustard. And guess who was supposed to fit in there? Oscar did not want to hurt his mother's feelings, so he decided to wear the silly costume. That night, all the dogs on the block gathered to show out their costumes. Everyone was looking quite scary. Then Oscar showed up, looking quite frank. When the dogs saw Oscar in his silly costume, they howled with laughter. Looked at Oscar, they cried. "He really is a wiener dog." Poor Oscar was so embarrassed. Wiener dog," laughed the other dogs. As they ran out to go trick-or-treat, Oscar tried to keep up with the dogs, but his silly costume kept slowing him down. All night long, the other dogs hounded every treat they could get their paws on. So by this time, Oscar got to each house, there were no treats left. Soon trick-or-treating was over, and the dogs walked home past a spooky graveyard. Suddenly, a horrible hissing sound filled the air. The dogs stopped dead in their tracks. Then, out of the graveyard rose a ghastly monster. The dogs screamed for their lives. They dropped their treats and jumped into a nearby pond. The monster moved closer. "Please don't eat us," cried the dogs. The monster yowled and hissed. "Boo-hoo-hoo," sobbed the dogs. The monster jumped up and down. "Somebody save us," shrieked the dogs. Just then, somebody showed up. It was Oscar. Because Oscar was so short, he was something that the other dogs had not seen. "That's no monster," cried Oscar. And with a loud bark, Oscar waddled to the rescue. Oscar chomped and tugged with all his might. Rip! And there, standing in the moonlight, were a couple of ornery cats. "Help!" cried the cats. "We're being attacked by a giant frankfurter." And they ran off screaming through the graveyard. The dogs in the pond had seen the whole thing, and now it was their turn to be embarrassed. "We've been chased into a pond by a couple of cats," they moaned. But Oscar was a true friend. He leaped into the water and swam out the dogs. Oscar's silly costume made a wonderful lift raft, and the dogs climbed up. "All aboard," Oscar called, and he dog-pedaled back to the shore. When they got back to the dry land, all the dogs shared their Halloween treats with Oscar. Because Oscar had been so brave, the dogs changed his nickname from Wiener Dog to Hero Sandwich. And from that night on, nobody ever made fun of Oscar again. Happy Halloween, the end.
How y'all doing? My name is Solon Page III. I'm number 38 for University of Tennessee, and I play inside linebacker. Today I'll be reading I Need My Monster by Amanda Knoll. Tonight, when I looked under the bed for my monster, I found this note instead. Gone fishing, back in the week, Gabe. What was I going to do? I needed my monster under my bed. How was I supposed to get to sleep if my monster was gone? I tried to sleep, but it wasn't the same without Gabe. I missed his ragged breathing, his nose whistling, the scrabbling of his uncut claws. How would I ever get to sleep without Gabe's familiar scary noises and his spooky green ooze? It was no use. Gabe would be gone for a week, and I just had to have my monster. I climbed quietly out of bed so my parents wouldn't hear me. Grown-ups have some strange ideas about monsters under beds. I knocked on the floorboards, then scrambled back under my covers and waited nervously. Would a new monster appear? What would he be like? Would his snorting be as cheerful as Gabe's? When I heard some creaking under my bed, I knew that was the substitute monster had arrived. Good evening, said a low, breathy voice. My name is Herbert, and I will be your monster for the evening. What kind of name is that for a monster? You don't sound scary at all. Have you ever scared a kid before? Well, no, but I've read all the best books on the topic. Do you have long teeth and scratchy claws? I asked. No, but I have an overbite. And I am a mouth breather. Listen. Herbert's panting was kind of scary, but it wasn't enough for me. Listen, Herbert, I'm sorry, I just don't think this is going to work. It's nothing personal, but I really need a monster with claws. Picky, Herbert complained. As you wish, I'll go. There was some more creaking, and then Herbert was gone. Some scratching warned me that a second monster had appeared. Good evening, he said in a high, silky voice. My name is Ralph. I understand you need a monster with claws. If you would please lean over, I will hold out an arm for inspection. I crouched on the edge of my bed, hoping to see a horrible, shaggy arm with sharp, ragged claws. Instead, I was surprised to see silky, brushed fur with smooth, shiny claws. Excuse me? I don't mean to be rude, I asked. But is that nail polish on your claws? Yes, it is, Ralph replied. I believe professional monsters should always be well groomed. I could tell that this was not going to work either. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Ralph, but I need a monster with scary claws. Like Gabe's, I thought. I heard some more scratching, and I knew Ralph was gone. A minute later, a third voice from under the bed rasped. Check out these claws, kid. I gathered my courage and peeped over the edge. The claws were impressive, jagged, and dark, and razor sharp. So far, so good. I was a little nervous. Could you stick out your tail? I whispered. Sure, but don't get scared. I peeked through my fingers and a slimy tail slithering over the foot of my bed. That's when I noticed the bow. Are you a girl monster? Of course I am, she snapped. I'm Cynthia. Do you have a problem with that? Yeah, I do, I admitted. I definitely need a boy monster. Boy monsters are for boys and girl monsters are for girls. Everybody knows that. Well, aren't you a picky one, she sniffed. And then she was gone. Was I being picky? No. I knew that my monster needed to be well-clawed and menacing. The whole point of having a monster, after all, was to keep me in bed, imagining all the scary stuff that could happen if I got out. Then I heard a shuffling noise and some slobbering. A fourth monster was under my bed. Hey, my name is Mac. One look at his claws proved that Mac was a big, scruffy boy monster. I shivered. Maybe this one will work out. Those are excellent claws. But do you have a long tail? I leaned over to see. No, my tail is stumpy, Max slurped. But I do have a unusually long tongue. Why would I be afraid of a long tongue? I asked. Oh, I don't know, he said, trying to sound terrifying. You never know when I might lick you. I fell back in bed laughing. Well, if you're not even gonna try to work with me, Mac whined. I held my giggles. I really don't think you should send me away, he warned. Kids who reject 5 monsters in one night? I did not reject 5 monsters in one night, I interrupted. My regular monster went fishing. Fishing, eh? Maybe he just left because you're so picky. Fine, I'm out of here. But I wouldn't expect another monster tonight if I were you. How was I ever going to get to sleep without my monster? I was surprised to hear creaking under the bed. Loud creaking with scratching. I thought no more monsters were going to appear tonight, I said. Sorry I'm late, kid. Whew, it was Gabe. I thought I would enjoy fishing, but I didn't, he explained. Those fish scare too easily. No challenge at all. You, however, are challenging, my friend. You're almost too old to be afraid of monsters. You keep me on my toes. Ah, toes. A delicious snack. The bed quivered as Gabe's stomach rumbled with hunger. Now, if you don't mind, I like to start the evening with an ominous puddle of drool. I peeked over the edge of the bed. Green ooze spread soundlessly underneath. Then the bed trembled as Gabe unfurled his spiked tail. He was daring me to guess where he might pop up. I shivered. So you have some substitute monsters tonight, Gabe said, sharpening his claws on my bedpost. Were you scared? Then Gabe started tapping. I could tell he wanted to know if I still needed him. No other monster could scare me like you, I giggled, diving under my covers and pulling them up tight. Through the blanket, I heard Gabe's soft, comforting snorts. Ha! I knew it. We're made for each other, he growled. When my blanket started to slip off the bed, I knew Gabe was ready to eat. Now, if you could please stick out your foot, he said. I like to nibble on your pinky. I yanked my blanket back up and scrunched my feet in so Gabe couldn't get them. No toes tonight, but you can have this, I'd offered, pushing my pillow off the bed. I didn't even hear it hit the floor. Gabe was back. The ooze was perfect. Everything was back to normal. I shivered again. I'd be asleep in no time.
Good morning. I'm Jalen McCullough, defensive back, number 22 for the University of Tennessee. And today I will be reading This is the House That the Monsters Built by Stephen Megzer and illustrated by Jared Lee. Let's get started. This is the house that monsters built. This is the spooky house that monsters built. This is the mummy who raised the wall inside the house that the monsters built. This is the spider who started to crawl that shocked the mummy who raised the wall inside the house that the monsters built. This is the werewolf who put in the door that stopped the spider who started to crawl that shocked the mummy who raised the wall inside the house that the monsters built. This is the skeleton who nailed down the floor that upset the werewolf who put in a door that stopped the spider who started to crawl that shocked the mummy who raised the wall inside the house that the monsters built. This is Frankie who brought in a chair that rattled the skeleton who nailed down the floor that upset the werewolf who put in a door that stopped the spider who started to crawl that shocked the mummy who raised the wall inside the house the monsters built. This is the black cat who jumped in the air that terrified Frankie who brought in a chair that rattled the skeleton who nailed down the floor that upset the werewolf who put down the door, that stopped the spider who started to crawl, that shocked the mummy who raised the wall, inside the house the monsters built. These are the bats who hung from a beam, that scared the black cat who jumped in the air, that terrified Frankie who brought in a chair, that rattled the skeleton who knelt on the floor, that upset the werewolf who put in the door, that stopped the spider who started to crawl, that shocked the mummy who raised the wall, inside the house the monsters built. This is the zombie who let out a scream, that scattered the bats who hung from a beam, that scared the black cat who jumped in the air, that terrified Frankie who brought in a chair, that rattled the skeleton who knelt on the floor, that upset the werewolf who put in the door, that stopped the spider who started to crawl, that shocked the mummy who raised the wall, inside the house that the monsters built. This is the ghost who shouted out boo, that startled the zombie who let out a scream, that scattered the bats who hung from a beam, that scared the black cat who jumped in the air, that terrified Frankie who brought in a chair, that rattled the skeleton who knelt on the floor, that upset the werewolf who put in the door, that stopped the spider who started to crawl, that shocked the mummy who raised the wall, inside the house that the monsters built. This is the old witch who stirred up the brew, that spooked the ghost who shouted out boo, that startled the zombie who let out a scream, that scattered the bats who hung from a beam, that scared the black cat who jumped in the air, that terrified Frankie who brought in a chair, that rattled the skeleton who knelt on the floor, that upset the werewolf who put in the door, that stopped the spider who started to crawl, that shocked the mummy who raised the wall, inside the house the monsters built. This is the vampire who tripped on his feet, that stunned the old witch who stirred up the brew, that spooked the ghost who shouted out boo, that startled the zombie who let out a scream, that scattered the bats who hung from a beam, that scared the black cat who jumped in the air, that terrified Frankie who brought in the chair, that rattled the skeleton who knelt on the floor, that upset the werewolf who put in the door, that stopped the spider who started to crawl, that shocked the mummy who raised the wall, inside the house that the monsters built. These are the kids who yelled out trick or treat, that woke up the vampire who tripped on his feet, that stunned the old witch who stirred up the brew, that spooked the ghost who shouted out boo, that startled the zombie who let out a scream, that scattered the bats who hung from a beam, that scared the black cat who jumped in the air, that terrified Frankie who brought in a chair, that rattled the skeleton who knelt on the floor, that upset the werewolf who put in the door, that stopped the spider who started to crawl, that shocked the mummy who raised the wall, here at the house that the monsters built. The end.